The White House briefing room buzzed with the usual hum of anticipation on a crisp March morning in 2025. Reporters shuffled their notes, cameras whirred softly, and the air crackled with the unspoken tension that had defined Donald Trump's second term. At the podium stood Karoline Leavitt, the youngest White House press secretary in history, her blonde hair pulled back neatly, her signature magenta suit a bold splash of color against the muted backdrop. At just 27, she'd already earned a reputation as a fierce defender of Trump's agenda, her sharp wit and unflappable demeanor making her a formidable presence. But today, something was different. The reporters sensed it. The way her green eyes flickered with a quiet intensity, the slight curve of her lips hinting at a secret she was about to unleash. "Good afternoon, everyone," Karoline began, her voice steady and commanding. "Before I take your questions, I have an announcement that I believe the American people deserve to hear." The room fell silent, pens poised, cameras zooming in. She adjusted the stack of papers in front of her, a subtle move that belied the bombshell she was about to drop. For too long, this administration has been fighting to drain the swamp, something President Trump promised in 2016 and doubled down on in 2024. Today, we've uncovered evidence of a secret financial scandal that's been festering under the noses of the American people, orchestrated by none other than the Democratic elite. A murmur rippled through the press corps. Karoline held up a hand, silencing them. Over the past 2 months, our team, led by the president's directive and with the assistance of Elon Musk's Doge initiative, has been auditing federal spending. What we found was staggering. A slush fund, hidden in plain sight, funneled through a network of shell companies tied to prominent Democrats. Over $500 million in taxpayer dollars, siphoned off to fund private jets, luxury retreats, and, get this, offshore accounts linked to the very politicians who've been preaching equity from their ivory towers. The room erupted. CNN's Karoline Collins shot to her feet, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Karoline, do you have proof of these allegations? This sounds like a wild conspiracy." Karoline didn't flinch. She leaned into the microphone, her tone icy. "Karoline, I don't deal in conspiracies. I deal in facts. And the facts are in these documents." She tapped the stack of papers with a manicured nail. Bank records, emails, flight logs, all obtained legally through Doge's forensic accounting team. You'll get your copies after this briefing, but I'll give you a teaser. One email from a senior Democratic senator brags about a weekend in the Caymans paid for by what he calls the Rainy Day Fund. Spoiler alert, that fund came from your tax dollars. The briefing room descended into pandemonium. Reporters shouted over each other, demanding names, dates, specifics. Karoline stood tall, unflappable, her gaze sweeping the room like a general surveying a battlefield. She'd known this moment would come, had prepared for it since the day Trump tapped her for this role. Growing up in New Hampshire, scooping ice cream at her parents' stand, she'd never imagined she'd be here, exposing corruption at the highest levels. But she'd learned early on that truth was a weapon, and she wielded it now with precision. Back at the White House, President Trump watched the briefing on a flat screen in the Oval Office, a grin spreading across his face. "She's a killer," he muttered to an aide, sipping his Diet Coke. "The best, believe me." He'd always seen something in Karoline, her loyalty, her fire, and now she was delivering, shaking the foundations of Washington in a way only a Trump loyalist could. As the briefing ended, Karoline stepped away from the podium, leaving the press corps scrambling. She knew the Democrats would hit back hard. They were already in panic mode, phones buzzing in congressional offices, aides whispering in hallways. But this was just the beginning. The real fight was yet to come. The sun had barely set over Washington, D.C. when the Democratic counterattack began. Karoline Leavitt's briefing had ignited a firestorm, and the party's power players weren't about to let her claims stand unchallenged. In a sleek office atop Capitol Hill, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer huddled with his inner circle, Nancy Pelosi, still a force despite her age, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, whose fiery rhetoric had made her a progressive darling. The air was thick with tension, the faint hum of a shredder in the background a grim reminder of the stakes. "We can't let this stick," Schumer said, his voice low and gravelly. He adjusted his glasses, peering at a tablet streaming Karoline's briefing on loop. "That little Trump attack dog thinks she can bury us with a stack of papers? She's got no idea who she's dealing with." Pelosi nodded, her lips pursed. "She's young, Chuck. Arrogant. But she's not stupid. Those documents she wouldn't have gone public without something concrete. AOC leaned forward, her eyes blazing. This is a distraction. They're losing on policy, so they're slinging mud. We need to hit back harder, call it a fabricated smear campaign. Within hours, the Democratic machine roared to life. MSNBC aired a primetime special, The Trump Playbook, Lies and Desks, with Rachel Maddow dissecting Karoline's claims line by line. This is classic MAGA, Maddow sneered, holding up a blurry screenshot of the Doge audit report. Half-truths and innuendo dressed up as evidence. Where are the names? Where's the proof? On X, blue-check influencers flooded the platform with hashtags like #CarolineLies and #TrumpScam, accusing the White House of manufacturing a crisis to deflect from Trump's latest tariff war with China. But Karoline wasn't rattled. Back at the White House, she sat in her cramped office, a cup of black coffee cooling on her desk as she pored over the next batch of documents. Her deputy, a wiry ex-Marine named Jake Torres, burst in, his tie askew. They're calling it a hoax, boss, he said, dropping a tablet in front of her. Schumer's got a presser scheduled for tomorrow, says he'll sue for defamation if we don't retract. Karoline smirked, glancing at the screen. Let him sue. He'll be begging for a retraction when we release the flight logs tomorrow. Private jets don't lie, Jake. She'd always known the Democrats would fight dirty. Growing up in a small town, she'd watched her parents battle local bureaucrats over zoning laws, petty corruption dressed up as procedure. This was the same game, just on a bigger stage. And she had the upper hand, evidence, not spin. The Doge team, handpicked by Elon Musk himself, had spent weeks tracing the money from a shady Delaware LLC to a Cayman Islands bank account tied to a Democratic super PAC. The paper trail was airtight, and Karoline was ready to unveil it. That night, she briefed Trump in the residence. He lounged in a leather armchair, a plate of fries untouched on the table. They're panicking, Karoline, he said, chuckling. Schumer's sweating like a pig on a treadmill. You're doing tremendous, folks are saying it's the best press conference they've ever seen. Karoline nodded, her mind already racing ahead. Tomorrow's the knockout punch, sir. We've got names, big ones. They won't know what hit them. As she left the residence, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, back off or you'll regret it. She stared at the screen, her pulse quickening. The Democrats weren't just fighting in public, they were playing in the shadows now. But Karoline Leavitt didn't back down. Not then, not ever. She slipped the phone into her pocket and headed back to her office, ready to sharpen her next move. The next morning, Washington awoke to a city on edge. Karoline Leavitt's promise of more revelations hung over the Capitol like a storm cloud, and the press corps was ravenous. By 10 a.m., the White House briefing room was packed shoulder to shoulder, the air thick with coffee fumes and nervous energy. Karoline strode to the podium, her magenta suit swapped for a crisp navy blazer, serious, unrelenting. In her hands, she carried a sleek black binder, its contents the key to the chaos about to unfold. No pleasantries today, she began, her voice cutting through the chatter. Yesterday, I told you about a $500 million slush fund. Today, I'm naming names. She flipped open the binder, pulling out a single sheet. Flight logs from a private jet registered to Blue Horizon LLC, a shell company funded by Democratic donors. On March 12, 2024, this jet flew from Dulles to Grand Cayman. Passengers included Senator Richard Durbin, Representative Adam Schiff, and this one's a fan favorite, former Speaker Nancy Pelosi. The room exploded. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions. Karoline, where's the proof? Yelled a voice from the back. She held up a hand, silencing them, then projected a grainy photo onto the screen behind her. Pelosi stepping off the jet, a wide-brimmed hat shielding her face, flanked by aides carrying Louis Vuitton bags. That's your proof, Karoline said coolly. And here's more, bank transfers from Blue Horizon to a Cayman account authorized by Schiff's chief of staff. Over $12 million wired the day after that trip. Coincidence? I think not. The briefing was a masterstroke. Karoline laid out the evidence with surgical precision, emails bragging about offshore bonuses, receipts for a $3 million yacht docked in Miami, even a voice memo of Durbin laughing about taxpayer-funded Mai Tais. The Doge team had outdone themselves, and Karoline delivered it all with the calm of a prosecutor sealing a conviction. By the time she stepped away, the press corps was in a frenzy, live feeds cutting to stunned anchors on every network. Across town, the Democratic response was unraveling. Schumer's planned press conference turned into a shouting match as reporters ambushed him with Karoline's evidence. This is a witch hunt, he barked, his face flushed. Fabricated nonsense from a desperate administration. But the cracks were showing. Pelosi canceled a scheduled CNN interview citing health concerns while Schiff tweeted a cryptic denial, "I've never set foot in the Caymans." This is Trumpian fiction. X lit up with memes, Pelosi sipping a cocktail under a palm tree, Schiff photoshopped onto a yacht, drowning out the Democrats' spin. Karoline watched it all unfold from the West Wing, her office now a war room. Jake Torres paced behind her, scrolling X on his phone. "They're toast, boss," he said, grinning. Hashtag Caymangate is trending #1. Karoline didn't smile. She was already thinking 3 steps ahead. The threatening text from last night gnawed at her. Someone was scared enough to get personal. She'd asked the Secret Service to trace it, but no leads yet. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger wasn't in the briefing room, it was lurking closer than she realized. That afternoon, Trump summoned her to the Oval Office. "Beautiful job, Karoline," he said, gesturing at the TV replaying her briefing. "The best, folks are saying it's better than Watergate. We're winning bigly." She nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. "Thank you, sir. But they're not done fighting. They'll come for us now hard." Trump leaned back, smirking. "Let 'em try. We've got the truth and you've got the guts. They're finished." As she left, her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. "You're digging your own grave." Karoline's jaw tightened. The Democrats were down, but they weren't out. And she was ready for the next round. The White House glowed under the soft March dusk. But inside Karoline Leavitt's office, the atmosphere was anything but serene. Papers littered her desk, flight logs, bank records, encrypted emails from the Doge team, each a piece of the puzzle she'd weaponized against the Democrats. Her latest briefing had landed like a sledgehammer, and the fallout was seismic. Cable news ran split screens of her podium takedown alongside Democratic denials, while X buzzed with Caymangate memes and calls for congressional resignations. But Karoline wasn't celebrating. The threatening texts, "To now," loomed over her like a dark cloud, a reminder that this fight was personal. She leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples, when Jake Torres burst in, his face pale. "Boss, you need to see this." He thrust a tablet at her. A grainy security cam still pulled up. A black SUV idling outside her Georgetown apartment the night before, its plates obscured. "Secret Service flagged it," Jake said, his voice tight. "No ID yet, but it's not random. They're watching you." Karoline stared at the image, her stomach twisting. She'd known the Democrats would retaliate, but this was a line crossed. "Get me the agent in charge," she said, her tone steel. "And tell them to double the detail tonight." Across the Potomac, the Democratic war room was in chaos. Schumer, Pelosi, and AOC convened in a discreet penthouse, their aides scrambling to contain the bleeding. "She's got us pinned," Pelosi snapped, pacing with a glass of Chardonnay. "Those logs. How the hell did they get them?" Schumer sank into a chair, exhausted. "Musk's Doge freaks. They've got tech we can't touch." OC slammed her fist on the table. "Then we discredit her. Dig up dirt. Affairs, taxes, anything. She's not untouchable." A shadowy figure in the corner, a fixer known only as Grayson, spoke up, his voice low. "I've got people on it. She's clean so far, but everyone's got a weakness. Give me 48 hours. Back at the White House, Karoline briefed Trump late that night. He sat behind the resolute desk, a rare frown creasing his face as she recounted the SUV sighting. "They're scared, Karoline," he said, tapping a pen. "Scared animals bite. You're sure you can handle this?" She met his gaze, unflinching. "I didn't sign up for easy, sir. They want a war. They'll get one." Trump nodded, a spark of pride in his eyes. "Good. Tomorrow you go harder, release the donor list. Let's see 'em squirm." The next morning, Karoline took the podium again, her navy blazer swapped for crimson, a signal of blood in the water. "Yesterday we named politicians," she said, her voice ringing out. "Today we name the money. Over 200 Democratic donors, CEOs, Hollywood types, Silicon Valley billionaires funneled cash into Blue Horizon LLC. Names you'll recognize: Soros, Spielberg, Zuckerberg." She paused, letting the weight sink in. "These aren't small fries. They're the puppet masters, and they've been caught." The press corps erupted, but Karoline powered through, dropping a bombshell. "We've also traced $50 million to a DNC slush fund for the 2026 midterms. Your tax dollars, folks, bankrolling their next power grab." The briefing sent shockwaves. Protests erupted outside Democratic offices, chants of "lock them up" echoing through D.C. streets. But as Karoline left the podium, her phone buzzed again. Last warning. Quit or we bury you. This time, a photo was attached, her, walking alone near the Lincoln Memorial, snapped from a distance. Her breath caught. They weren't just watching, they were hunting. She forwarded it to the Secret Service, her resolve hardening. The Democrats thought they could intimidate her into silence. They were dead wrong. The White House briefing room had never felt so electric. It was March 31, 2025, and Karoline Leavitt stood at the podium for what she knew would be her defining moment. The past week had been a whirlwind. Her exposés of the Democratic slush fund had toppled careers, sparked protests, and drawn death threats that now shadowed her every move. The crimson blazer she wore today wasn't just a fashion choice, it was a declaration of war. Behind her, a screen flickered to life, ready to display the final blow. "Good morning," she began, her voice ablade. "The American people have seen the evidence, $500 million stolen, hidden, and spent by Democratic elites. Today we close the book. With the president's approval, I'm releasing the full Doge audit, every transaction, every name, every dirty deal." She clicked a remote and the screen filled with a spreadsheet, dates, dollar amounts, and a roll call of Washington's power players. Senator Durbin's $8 million condo in Miami. Schiff's $15 million wired to a Swiss account. Pelosi's $3 million yacht christened Equity's Edge. All paid for with your money. The room ignited. Reporters shouted, cameras flashed, but Karoline pressed on. "This isn't just corruption, it's betrayal. And it ends now. The DOJ is reviewing these findings and I promise you, accountability is coming." She stepped back, letting the chaos unfold, her green eyes blazing with triumph. She'd done it, ripped the mask off the swamp and held it up for the world to see. Outside, the fallout was immediate. Crowds swarmed Capitol Hill, waving Trump flags and demanding resignations. Durbin announced a leave of absence, Schiff vanished from X, and Pelosi issued a shaky statement about retirement plans. The DNC scrambled to distance itself, but the damage was irreparable. CNN grudgingly aired the audit while Fox News looped Karoline's briefing with headlines like "Leavitt's Reckoning." On X, #Kamengate gave way to #DrainTheSwamp2, trending worldwide. But victory came with a price. That afternoon, as Karoline left the West Wing, Secret Service agents swarmed her. "Ma'am, we've got a credible threat," the lead agent said, ushering her into an SUV. "Trace the texts, burn her phone, but the photo's metadata points to a DC fixer tied to Schumer's orbit." Karoline's jaw tightened. "Grayson?" she asked, recalling whispers of the shadowy operative. The agent nodded. "We're closing in. Stay low till we've got him." She spent the night in a safe house, a modest apartment with barred windows, poring over the audit one last time. Jake Torres joined her, his usual bravado replaced by quiet awe. "You've changed the game, boss," he said, handing her a coffee. "They're done." Karoline sipped, her mind racing. "Not yet. They'll regroup. But we've got the upper hand for now." The next morning, Trump called her to the Oval Office. "Tremendous, Karoline," he boomed, clapping her on the shoulder. "The best, folks are saying it's historic. You're a star." She smiled faintly. "Thank you, sir. But they tried to scare me off, still might." Trump's eyes narrowed. "They touch you, they deal with me. We're winning and they hate it. Keep going." By noon, Grayson was in custody, nabbed in a sting near the Potomac. He flipped fast, spilling details of a Democratic plot to smear Karoline with fabricated scandals, none of which stuck. The panic was over, the swamp was draining. That evening, Karoline stood on her apartment balcony, the DC skyline glittering below. Her phone was silent at last. She'd faced the threats, exposed the truth, and come out stronger. The fight wasn't over, but for now she'd won. And America was watching. The next morning, Trump called her to the Oval Office. "Tremendous, Karoline," he boomed, clapping her on the shoulder. "The best, folks are saying it's historic. You're a star." She smiled faintly. "Thank you, sir. But they tried to scare me off, still might." Trump's eyes narrowed. "They touch you, they deal with me. We're winning and they hate it. Keep going." By noon, Grayson was in custody, nabbed in a sting near the Potomac. He flipped fast, spilling details of a Democratic plot to smear Karoline with fabricated scandals, none of which stuck. The panic was over, the swamp was draining. That evening, Karoline stood on her apartment balcony, the DC skyline glittering below. Her phone was silent at last. She'd faced the threats, exposed the truth, and come out stronger. The fight wasn't over, but for now she'd won. And America was watching.